All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. A very special episode of the Roses Rhetoric podcast. Joining us today, Brian Anderson. My co-host Joe had a great idea. He said, "Jimmy, behind every great brand is a sports team. Where would orange juice be without Minute Maid Park? Where would the letter A be without the team from Oakland?" So I thought, we got to get into the high stakes world of intramural softball. And so we began taking some resumes, and one really jumped to the top of the pack. I'm talking, of course, about Brian Anderson. Brian, before we get started, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into the interview.
Yeah, well, I'm a former aspiring NBA point guard that turned baseball player in high school, and I realized I wasn't going to make it to the NBA. So I went to the University of Arizona on a baseball scholarship. From born and raised in Tucson, so got to stay close to home. That's where I met someone that's in your family, Jimmy, is Richard Mercado. Played baseball with him at University of Arizona. Great player in his own right. And then, I played baseball there. Was drafted by the White Sox in 2003 in the first round. Got called up 2005. Won the World Series. Thought playing in the major leagues that was going to be like every single year. But little did I know the following season I was hitting about $180 in May, and realized, man, this big league stuff is not so easy. You don't win championships every year and bat 300. So, I was fortunate enough to play in the major leagues for 5 seasons, and then tried to pitch for a few years. I also blame Richard Mercado for that, for allowing me to pitch. He should have smacked me with those big old meat hooks he has, and told me to keep playing the outfield. But looking back at it, I don't regret anything. It was a great learning experience. So now I'm on the podcast with you boys.
That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the actual interview. I think we got some good questions. We'll really get to the core of Brian Anderson and see if he's a good fit for the GM position of the team. Joe, when you're ready, hit us with that first interview question.
Yeah, and I'd like to reiterate, thanks for joining us, Brian. We're glad to have a fellow Tucsonan on the show.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah, you come from the world of baseball. What brought you to the high stakes world of intramural softball?
Well, first things first, I think it's every former major leaguer's dream is to not only participate in intramural softball, but also become the player coach / GM. So I think that with my experience and if nothing else, the access to former major league players that I have would put me at the top of the list, no doubt. Experience is fine, and I can still run and catch and throw, but I think the reason why I got to be at the top of the list for the GM role is because I just simply have the best access to a plethora of former major league players that border and some Hall of Famers to boot. So,
Brian, I've always have said, slow pitch is a thinking man's game. Underhand pitch is a thinking man's game. Talk a little bit about the mental aspect of baseball and whether or not that will translate to the mental game of slow pitch softball.
Well, I will give you an example. I play in a charity event every year, and I watched Frank Thomas, who is by far the top 3 best players I've ever played with, Carlos Lee. Combined, those guys have almost 1,000 home runs in the major leagues. I watched both of them strike out twice in slow pitch softball because the game, the speed is so much slower, and it's a mental. You think it's going to be so easy, but you get in your head and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, like wait. But the problem is in baseball, there is no waiting. You have to react. So the mental aspect in playing intramural softball is just as tough as playing, regular baseball, because it's timing's everything. I've swung and missed a couple of times, and I've also crushed some home runs. And I'll tell you what, you can't wait long enough. So that's it.
Yeah, I can't wait long enough. Unfortunately, my wife didn't agree with me. We got married a couple of years ago. But I'll tell you this, Brian. I think behind all culture is a scapegoat, and behind all teams is a common enemy. What enemy can our team unite against to solidify our camaraderie?
Well, it's by far the women. I mean, especially if we're playing co-ed, because the problem is they stink. You can't hit it too hard at them. You got to put them in you either got to be the catcher or put them in left field, or just hide them in one of the 4 outfield positions. And on top of that, I think and you can only hit so many home runs because you got to make sure they get a chance to bat. So I don't like playing any sports where females get to take the field next to me, because in my opinion, they're just a straight up liability.
We are a co-ed league, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But before then, Joe, I want to give you the next question.
Okay. All right, moving on. So, in the age of social media, teams rise and fall on highlight reel plays. What can you do, Brian, to inspire people to produce that illustrious 20 minutes of wow factor?
I would simply just ask them to pull up my highlights from my career. No one timed a dive, and no one timed more dives in center field and made the ESPN's top 10 more than I did. I mean, I'm the master at taking a routine fly ball and turning it into a spectacular play. Just watch the final catch I made in 2008, which sent us to the playoffs in the blackout game against the Minnesota Twins. I could have caught that ball in stride, but I thought, why not just dive and make it a little more exciting? And I did. So that's what's fun about the outfield is you can basically create, if you're not feeling too good, you can basically throw a few missteps in there and create your own highlight reel.
I've been saying that my whole life as a as a former pitcher on the old mound on the old softball field. You know, I was known for throwing a couple extra balls in there to kind of make the count a little more challenging, a little more interesting. I had my fair share of slides, my fair share of scrapes and bruises, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the position. But I want to talk about something else, maybe a little more controversial here, Brian. And so our league has a league-wide prohibition on fruity flavored chewing tobacco. And so as a result, we're looking for some other ways to reach out to the youth. How can we make intramural softball cool in the eyes of children?
I mean, I think you just make it competitive and also get some big league chew out there. I mean, every little kid can't resist the big league chew for about the 45 seconds it lasts in flavor. So you just got to get that big league chew out there and the bubble gum and just transfer that. And kids love all aspects. I mean, every kid loves to go out there and watch their parent or watch older people compete. And, you know, that's how I got good at playing baseball is I played against older people. So I was, often 12, 13 years old playing against, juniors and seniors in high school, get my ass handed to me. So, Richard Mercado will attest to this. You get better by playing against better competition. So I always encourage young kids to come out and see what the pace of the game looks like as compared to when, the kids their own age.
Great. Joe, when you're ready, the next question.
Yes, thanks for that. Okay, so as you know, we have COVID going on, and we've all been super hygiene focused lately because of it. So my question is, what role does enforcing strict water falling guidelines play in maintaining team level cleanliness?
I just simply will not compete in any league that is hindered by COVID. The great part about baseball is you get dirty. I would never play nor allow my players to play with masks on. I think that that also goes into my unwritten rule book of if you hustle, you're off the team in softball. So that's one thing I love about softball is we used to dominate this men's softball league. Every once in a while I'd fill in, and our coach and manager had one rule. He's like, if you try to leg out a double or a triple, you're benched or off the team. So just if you don't hit a home run, stay on first and we'll just go base to base. But yeah, if you're trying to show up to a baseball field and be clean, you're in the wrong neck of the woods. Go do something else.
Yeah, that's a real good point, Brian, about staying clean. You know, I always was wondering this myself. You know, a lot of baseball uniforms, and of course you played for the White Sox, known of course for many things, including White Sox. And I've always thought to myself, if you're wearing a white uniform, you're going to get a lot of grass stains. You're going to get a lot of dirt stains. Does that become part of the uniform, part of that vintage rough and tumble baseball look that people so heavily praise these days?
Yeah, I think that was more the grittier years in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and 90s. I think a lot of these guys now are so concerned with how good they look, and I mean they do look better. I mean the cleats are better, the uniforms are a lot more form fitting. They definitely look more like action figures now. But yeah, I come from an area where you slide, you take out guys at second base, you dive for balls. I mean, you if you go into the locker room with a clean uniform, you probably didn't do much that game, so it's kind of a bad look.
Yeah. And just real quickly, how important are appearances to be a good ball player? I mean, there must be some rule. I mean, you want to be attractive, right? I mean, this is, after all, it's a visual sport. You got to look it on the field. Tell us a little bit about that part of baseball.
Well, I think there's a two-part to that. I think that I've seen some of the best athletes I've ever played with in baseball. Their kind of whole motto is look good, feel good, play good, but also at the same time, some of the worst bodies I've ever seen in my life, the baseball uniform does a phenomenal job of hiding that. So, if you're ever a great baseball player, you can hide a crappy body in a baseball uniform, but for the most part, you always want to look good and feel like you feel your best out there. And yeah, you want to, it's almost like when you put a 3-piece suit on, you go to travel, and your baseball uniform, you want to look presentable, you want to look good, but you also want to feel agile and feel like you can go make a play.
So Brian, are you saying that someone like Roberto Colon might look a little bit different when he's out of his uniform as opposed to when he's in his uniform?
Who, Bartolo Colon, you mean?
Yeah, Bartolo
Yeah,
Colon.
I played with Bartolo Colon, and let me tell you, underneath all that love and all those curves, he's solid as a rock. In his heyday, I used to play with him twice, and he only does one thing. I mean, he takes care of his arm, but all that guy does is forearm exercises. His forearm is like a bowling ball, so that's why he's able to maintain that sultry physique and also throw 100 miles an hour into his late 40s.
I love a good sultry physique, and I love Bartolo Colon, hell of a ball player. And we have a couple more questions, but before we get there, let's talk just a little bit longer about Brian Anderson, the person. Brian, tell us, what's your favorite pool toy, and how important are pool games in being a good competitive baseball player?
Are you talking about my favorite, like at the pool, like in the water?
Yes, in the water.
My favorite pool toy is sunblock. I don't know if you guys have seen me through this screen here. That the sun's my worst enemy. Any more than 10 minutes, and you'll be taking me to the hospital. I was blessed with this pasty white Irish English skin from my grandparents' side on my mom's side. So, although it looks great, blonde hair and having blue eyes, like I said, the sun can be my best friend and also my worst enemy. So that's my t-shirt, a hat, and sunblock are my favorite pool toys.
Yeah, and I think we both want to say, Joe, Brian, you do look good, and of course you are attractive, and that's a big part of the position. So we thank you for being attractive. And the reason I ask about the pool, and Joe, let me get your thoughts on this as well. I've always have thought myself that a key difference between adults and children is what they do when they're in bodies of water. Now, I think as you get older, the preference is for people just to kind of stand around in these puddles. And I never bought into that. I'm still somebody, when I go into the pool, I still play pool games. I swim around, I still like it on my breath. I play with the pool torpedo, I play with pool noodles, I dive for rings. To me, that's part of how I maintain a hard, healthy lifestyle. Now, I want to know from Joe and also from Brian, when you guys are in the pool, are you guys still kids at heart, or have you become boring adults?
You want to take that, Joe?
Yeah. I mean, once the sunscreen's on, I'm with Brian on this. Once the sunscreen's on, everything else is fair game. It makes you quicker underwater. It adds that little membrane on your skin, and
all true.
Bust out the noodles,
bust
out the torpedoes.
What's the game? I mean, one thing I always played was chicken, where you put it on top of your shoulders, and and then when you're in 7th grade or 6th grade, you play chicken, and all you do the entire time is just see if you can try to cop a feel on like a girl that's 2 years older than you, because you're such a perverted little bastard. You don't know what's going on yet. So
I see. The thing is, I was always so small. I was always the person on top of someone else's shoulders. That was because I have that small.
However you got to go about it, man. However you got to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah, pool is always a fun game to play, and I always enjoy swimming. And it sounds like as long as you have plenty of sunscreen, which you will have on the field, part of their league regulations, always make sure you have good SPF 50 or higher on the field. We'll be in good shape. Joe, take us to our last question.
Sure, just one more. All right, Brian, I want you to imagine that you're a cop. Wait, you're not actually a cop, right?
No, but yeah, I have family members that are. But go ahead, I'll take this one.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So imagine you're a cop and in a small town playing by your own rules. Let's assume there's been a murder and everyone is a suspect, but you're kind of tapped out from a long night before. The question is, how can you pawn the job of solving the murder off onto subordinates while still being able to claim credit afterwards?
I don't know. It depends. In my small town, do we have a game that day on our intramural softball team?
That's a great question. And the answer is no. This is an off-season murder.
Well, that's fine, because I never have an off season. So what I do is I basically just pretend like I didn't see it, and if someone's with me and they're my subordinate, they're beneath me, I instantly I fake sickness, tell them to take the lead and that this is their big chance and their big opportunity, and I shake it to the gym and just act like I never saw anything.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
Joe,
you got to have it.
the thing about a GM is you want them to really be able to take credit. Really they're the figurehead of the team. They have to look good, they have to act good, but of course we don't want them to be doing that much work. This is only intramural after all. And so I really like that answer from Brian. Brian, I know that you said we only had you for about 15 minutes today. We're coming up on that time right now. Just a couple of things. I would be remiss if I did not stick up for our female team members. I will say the year that we had the co-ed team, there were some of the best players on the team, and I think our co-ed team's going to be.
You're on the wrong team, brother.
Oh, Brian, this has been absolutely phenomenal, and I like I said, it was a very competitive interview process. We have a few more resumes that we got to get through before we have any final decisions. But we were so happy to have you reach out to the show to be on this team. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go to a quick break. We're going to do a quick debrief with Brian. Then Joe and I are going to come back for a little bit longer on the episode. So everybody just hold tight, and we'll be right back. All right, folks, and we are back in action, back in the studio. Just wanted to have a quick debrief with Brian. Again, we thank him for joining us and for interviewing for the position. Obviously, as you could tell, he was in his car. The man literally pulled over to do the interview. I mean, Joe, if that isn't dedication, I tell you, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think that this decision process is going to require some extreme deliberation. We're going to have to think about this real carefully before making our choice.
I think so too, and so we're going to put that on the back burner for a little bit, and like a lot of good names to go through on that list. Maybe we'll do a couple more interviews. We'll have to see how it all goes. But Joe, as you know, last week was daylight savings. Began our daylight savings. Now, if anybody knows anything about me, it is how much I hate getting up earlier. As long as Joe has known me, I've had a hard time getting up in the morning.
Well, that's because you don't go to sleep the night before.
That's true. I developed a really bad habit in college of instead of going to bed, I would just stay up. And I never really got over that habit. And I've continued with it in my adult life. And I was thinking, I think I have a way to fix daylight savings. I really do. People who don't know how daylight savings works, if you live in Arizona, here's what the rest of the country does. Every 6 months or whatever it is, we turn our clocks either ahead 1 hour and we lose an hour of sleep, or back an hour and gain an hour of sleep. Everybody likes turning your clocks back. And so my solution for daylight savings, Joe, is what if every 6 months we just kept on turning our clocks back 1 hour? I mean, think about it. Every 6 months you get 1 extra hour of sleep. All I hear about anymore is how everybody's sleep deprived. My solution is to always give you 1 extra hour.
Genius. It's like free money. It's like free money. You're just printing money. There's no downside to it.
I'm going to make a serious proposal to the legislature for this idea. I'm going to call it the Hackett Daylight Savings.
It's more than a savings at that point.
Yeah. Well, it's going to compound exponentially or something. I mean, it has to compound somehow. I don't know why, but I'm sure that it will. And but I'm looking forward to it because there's nothing I enjoy more than sleeping in 1 extra hour. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start rolling the clock back every 1 hour, every 6 months. We're going to get 1 extra hour of sleep. That is my solution. Now, Joe, I'm going to have a couple of questions for you that I think you're going to enjoy. But before doing that, any longtime fans of the show know that we usually have a weekly album, an album of the week. And we do have one this week. Our write-up is still coming our way. But if anybody listening to this now wants to know what the album is, it is called, it's Portuguese, so I'm going to try and pronounce this right. It's called Saudade, and it's by a band called Thievery Corporation. It's a samba kind of it's a samba CD. I guess I don't really need to say any more than that. And anyways, it was really catchy. It's on YouTube. I watched the whole thing for free. I listened to it this week a couple of times. We're gonna put the write-up for that album up on the website in a little bit. But before doing that, or rather, when we get the write-up, we'll be putting it on the website.
Yes, and we'll be putting it on the Roses and Rhetoric Instagram as well.
Yes. Very good. Well, Joe, what did you think of our interview last week with Dr. Jacob Stania? How did you think that went?
I thought it went super well. I thought that was one of our better interviews. I think we got pretty lucky that he was such a good guest and he had such good answers and swag factor when he came on. I think that was helpful. I've been getting real good response from it. People really liked it. People enjoyed it. And I think it's something important, a good message to put out there too. And I'm happy that we were able to be a piece of that. But I think somehow he ended up liking us too. So
I think so too. I think we made a good impression. I think he had a good time. And he got me thinking about a point that we've talked about on the show before, which is that we don't stress the teaching people how to think skill set in school. And I was just thinking about how much more interesting science could be if it was presented in a way that kind of brought in some of the framework that he uses in the book, and the quote unquote philosophy of science. And I was just curious. I mean, what your thought is on that? Do you think that is a subject that we could bring in at the high school level? Do you think that we could bring that kind of material into kids younger in life rather than having it be, kind of this specialty that people will discover later on in life? I would say yes, but I wanted to get your take on it as well.
Conceptually, yeah, I 100% you could do something like that, but practically I would say definitely not. I don't think that the school systems are flexible enough and that there's too much money backing a lot of this science, quote unquote, that I think it would be a real difficult challenge to incorporate that into the existing school system. Now, if they change the school system, if we get a new system that's maybe a little bit more decentralized, then you would see that. You would see that real education's being made and real things being taught to people that can practically help them in life, and being able to tell good science from bad science is at the forefront of that, I would argue.
I could not agree more, and it got me thinking. So I'm leading you into a conversation that I was thinking about this week, and it was this idea. And you probably know more about this than I do, but this idea of finding the Aristotelian middle. You kind of have two extremes, and like the middle road is the best road kind of thing. And there's different examples of this, but I was trying to think of, because we were on that show, we're talking with Jacob last week, and kind of what we came up with in that conversation was this idea that science is in between two different extremes. The one extreme being something like complete denialism or complete ignorance, where we know nothing. And then on the other extreme, where we just believe everything, is on the side of obedience. Now, where everybody wants to be is in the middle, which is skepticism or science or some kind of critical thinking apparatus. We don't want to deny everything. We don't want to believe everything. We want to be thinking for ourselves and kind of existing in that middle ground. And I was thinking if I could think of other examples of finding a middle ground between two extremes that were equally unattainable, and seeing that middle ground did in fact play awful. And I came up with two other ones that I wanted to share with you today, because I think they're not straightforward. And I'm going to start with one where the middle region is religion. That's the middle. And on the one extreme of extreme religious belief would be bigotry. And on the other of extreme lack of religious belief would be chaos. Now, notice I'm not saying atheism. In fact, I'm going to give another one after this where the middle is atheism. I'm separating out religion and atheism to be kind of this golden middle. But the first one I wanted to get your thoughts on is this idea where religion is the balance between chaos and bigotry.
Okay.
And the idea is that religion is essentially, we have a small set of beliefs that we use for organizing society that are small in number, but that are essentially absolute and are beyond ourselves, that give society some kind of structure. But if we have too many such rules, and if we don't question enough, then it becomes an excuse for bigotry. Think homosexuals, and we go down the whole list. So without any such structures, we have complete chaos. With too many such structures, we have complete bigotry. In the middle, we have some kind of minimalism religion or something, as a set of ideals that we hold supreme, but that are small in number. And I wanted to throw that out as this idea of kind of the golden middle For anybody listening who knows more about philosophy than I do, if it's called something else, tell us below. I don't know the name for this. But in any event, I thought that was one I wanted to get your take on.
Okay, so let me see what I can do with this. I'll just back it up a little bit. My overall view of religion is that it's very effective for society, depending on the religion. I know a lot of the Christianity religions are arguably beneficial for societies. And the reason I think that is because it gives people this quality of virtue, right? And virtue is just something that you fundamentally believe, that you decide all your actions upon. Like, you weigh whatever your actions, your decisions are based on this kind of gold standard that you own called virtue. And you don't necessarily have to have religion to have virtue, but almost by coincidence, not by coincidence, but by design, I think that many of these religions instill these strong senses of virtue that people can use to make their decisions. And just having that confidence in your decision makes you infinitely more happy. Like having some sort of compass or Rosetta Stone or some sort of, no, what is it? Philosopher's Stone? No, that's for making gold. Anyways, just having something like that is what it gives you a calmness, and it can effectively act as that middle ground, because it's not perfect in any one way, but pragmatically it's beneficial for societies. So that's kind of where I look at religion, and I think that that's a big struggle for atheists, is they don't have that virtue that's been provided to them. So unless the atheist is a big go-getter and very I don't want to use the word scholar, but someone who goes out and asks these questions and thinks about these questions, I think the atheist often finds himself in a tough spot, because he's got no foundation to base his life decisions off of many times. No, that's not all of them. There's certainly atheists out there that have formed this virtue framework, but it is a big gray area overall, and I think your analysis is on point there.
And you actually set me up perfectly for the next one, because I think I'm going to play into your answer, I think, really well with my next kind of golden middle and framework here. And again, these are, anybody listening, these are just speculations. If you don't agree, tell us in the comment below, and we're happy to revisit these. And I think it's more about asking the right question and getting the right answer. So here's my second one. I'm going to put atheism in the middle. On the extreme of, quote, too much atheism, I'm going to put nihilism. And on the extreme lacking of atheism, I'm going to put superstition.
Mm-hmm.
That in the middle is this atheism as it exists. And let me explain why I'm putting these extreme lackings. In a sense, the superstition is where I'm housing the quote unquote God of the gap type arguments. What is lightning when God is mad? What's a volcano when God is mad? If you believe in, I'm going to say a funny phrase, I don't mean it to be literal, but in a sense, if you believe in many gods, then everything becomes a god, and you just have superstition because you never question anything. It's just, what is it? Supernatural. Okay. On the other hand, if you take this atheism belief, there is no God, no higher power, etc., very much to your point earlier, I think you can get into a realm of nihilism. And here we're using the sense of nihilism of basically, nothing matters. There's no point to anything, et cetera, et cetera. Along with the kind of the emotional nihilism as well, where you're depressed and, bummed out and everything. So atheism to the extreme gives you nihilism. Atheism to the complete absence of atheism, if you will, which again, it's a funny phrase because atheism is itself an absence of something, but I think people kind of get the idea of what we're talking about. With the extreme lacking, you have a superstition, and in the middle, the golden word of atheism.
Let me ask you this before you continue. How would you characterize the difference between skepticism and nihilism?
Yeah, that's a good question. Skepticism, I think, is more about always asking questions. I think if you're a nihilist, you have an answer. If you're a skeptic, you're wondering what the answer is. It's how do we know what to trust? How do we know what to believe? I think a nihilist is taking it a little bit further and saying nothing matters. there's no point in some sense for questioning things because nothing matters. So you're taking it to a conclusion. It's almost like, the same way that an optimist and a pessimist aren't really skeptics about the future. They're making a judgment about the future. It'll be better, it'll be worse by whatever measure they're using to determine better or worse. But they're making a statement about an outcome. So when I call myself an optimist, I believe the future will be better, given that we do certain things. I'm making a definite statement about what I think the future will be. And so I would put a nihilist in that same realm, that they're basically making a definitive judgment about the nature of things.
When you characterize yourself as an optimist, is that done out of a form of utility, like because just optimists just have more fun and can manifest things better for themselves in the world, or is it a hard wiring, or what's the framework behind that optimist mindset?
It is a little bit of all the above. I would say another thing I would add in there too is I do think that as humans, I don't like using the phrase human nature, because I feel like people can kind of fit human nature to be like whatever they want to be in the conversation. But I will say that I think humans at some level are programmed to be industrious, that we are programmed to look out on the world as it is, and through a process of imagination and social collaboration, we find ways of making things and improving things. We find ways, like we make tools, we make systems, we make communities. We're always in the process of invention and of discovery. And I think those two things go hand in hand to making the world better. Like we are always in the process of trying to improve things. I think that is innate to us. And so when I say that I'm an optimist, I'm saying I think the aspects of humanity that drive us to make these various improvements are still with us. I think there are different pressures that affect the rapidity to which we are changing the world that we are in. And I do think there are various cultural pressures that can dampen or improve those forces, but I think that they're always present. And so when I say that I'm an optimist, it means I think that those characteristics are part of what make us human, and that those aspects will not change in the future, that we'll continue to have those instincts moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to think of nihilism as a form of like accepting a god, right? Like it's different from apathy and from being apathetic towards things, because you're not just saying like, oh, I don't know, like who knows. You're actually picking a side, like you said, and I think that's the recipe for trouble, is when you start picking a side, because it's almost like you're putting that position on a pedestal, and it kind of influences you. Like it makes you susceptible to cognitive dissonance and all these different things. Like look at people from certain political parties that can never budge on a certain concept, or certain libertarian, atheist, Catholic, whatever. They find these hard rock rooted positions and they can't change from it. Yeah. Despite maybe even needing to at some points, and that creates a lot of conflict for them. And I think that that's a big problem, and something that people should watch out for as a whole.
I definitely agree with you. And it's funny because I think I do think for various reasons, it makes sense to be an optimist, but I agree with you that if you are so blinded by that belief that you can't see when things don't go well, and in a sense, you can always find yourself making excuses for why things aren't better and lying to yourself. Again, this is to beat a dead horse. This is precisely the thesis of Peter Thiel, et cetera, about we actually haven't made that much progress, and it would be a mistake to just lie to ourselves. I still think we should believe in the possibility of progress, and that I do think there are things that make progress more likely than not. But I'm always careful to say that I don't think it's guaranteed. And I think it's also important, kind of part of the framework that I operate with, is that it will only happen if we do certain things. Now, I think we have the capacity to do those things. Namely, those things are to be innovative, to go out and discover, and to believe in the power of teamwork and all these other kind of cliche things. But if we don't do those things, it will not get better. And so I think that's important. I agree with your statement about taking sides, and I would maybe add to it that for me, what I get concerned with is when people think that their outcomes are inevitable. I mean, to me, that's when it gets scary. When you think that your future will come true no matter what you do, then I think people release the reins of their life a little bit and are kind of okay, which is like kind of like sitting back and letting things play out. And I do not think that is a good recipe for life. And I am always concerned that when people think that certain, like I'll give you a phrase that I absolutely hate hearing, is the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody say that before. I always think, I mean, you have to be a complete idiot to be saying this. You know, the moral arc of the universe doesn't exist. There is no moral arc of the universe. It is people making decisions to change society. It is people risking their lives, risking their reputation, et cetera, to stand up for injustice and to fight it. That is what changes. It is not, there is not some grand scheme playing out. It is people doing that work. And I get upset when I hear people say that phrase because it seems very reductionist and very much this idea that justice is an inevitable outcome, which is of course ridiculous. So I always, when I hear phrases like that, I always get upset. I'm always that's so stupid. I hate when people say it.
I have trouble with words like that too, like justice or right or wrong or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, it's all subjective. If you imagine the universe or these things from the perspective of like a tree, like there is no right to a tree. There is no wrong to a tree. There is no justice. It's all just human invention.
Yeah.
And it's not even a well thought out human invention. It's just, I think it's Naval came up with the quote, and he said that society is what we call the collective craziness of everyone. Like it's just something we all agreed on arbitrarily. So
right.
And that's not consistent with nature. So once you start going down those rabbit holes of saying, oh, this isn't right, that's not right. Even when you start saying like this should be this way, this should not be this way. That's digging yourself in a hole, because it's saying that there's some desire that the universe has. There's some goal that it has. But with that being said, I think that the older I get, the more I realize the benefit in just going with the flow of the universe itself, like not trying to fight it. Like it doesn't have a narrative, but don't try to add a narrative where there isn't one. Like at the end of the day, you just got to put your goals out there and iterate them very clearly and carefully to yourself. And the universe is going to give it to you. It's going to be a subconscious act. It's not going to be a conscious thing that you do.
Yeah, I always like, well, I think, to me, what I always think of is the struggle of people that were involved in, say, like the civil rights movement, MLK, et cetera. And now imagine telling to MLK or somebody, oh, our concept of justice in the 1960s is perfect. It's all that we need. And meanwhile, we have to, the blacks in the country living, in basically an apartheid state. I mean, it would be absurd to tell people that justice is manifesting itself in the universe. I mean, the reason we have the Civil Rights Act is because the blacks in this country fought for it. They had to make it. They had to create it. And I always just get frustrated when people make things sound inevitable or finite, because of course I think these things are always improving upon themselves. I mean, I think our notion of what would have been just, 1,000 years ago is different than it is today. And those 1,000 years are marked with people fighting every step of the way to make it better. And so, I guess where I'm going with this is basically to say that don't believe things are possible, but don't believe things are inevitable. There's a difference, and it's important to know the difference, because one will call you to action and one will call you to, as you were saying earlier, apathy. You'll sit on your ass, you'll let the world pass over you. I would say don't do that. As you were saying, narrate your goals, figure out what you have to do to achieve those goals, and do it. Go out there and do it. Let me throw another one at you. I know you kind of got me in these thought exercises a few years ago when we were talking about the simulation theory. And remind me of the author's name. Nick Bostrom, I think is his name.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was watching a debate a little bit earlier, maybe a couple of years ago. I was thinking about it this week, and it basically is like the Matrix. I know I've talked about the Matrix before. Had to go back and revisit that question, one of our funnier moments on the episode. This one I actually do know, and it's thought out, so I can get it out to you. But it was this idea of trying to. It's very hard the point that the debater was making was that it's very hard to define happiness. That if you just hooked up a bunch of human brains to a dopamine machine, would that be happiness, or do you need something else? And probably the best rebuttal to this that I've heard yet is from Nassim Taleb, and I believe it's in his book Skin in the Game. But it's this idea of trying to frame, purpose and reality, which I think are linked together, and that it comes down to the idea of consequence. That what matters are the things that you do and their consequences, and it's not the dopamine rush in your head or something like that. It's the fact that when you do something, whether you know that it's real and that it matters, isn't so much how it makes you feel, but it's because of the things that it causes to happen after you do it. And I was thinking about that this week for a few reasons, but mostly just because whether it's virtual reality or something, I do think the dopamine farm is going to become a more and more a reality that people can just check into. And I think that would be a very empty existence, even though it might feel good in the moment, because it would be devoid of consequence.
Dopamine farm is what you said? Or
a dopamine farm, or just imagine a place you could go to where you plug in a needle into your arm and it just floods your brain with dopamine or something, or whether it's that or it's through some kind of visual hallucination that triggers the same effect, whatever it is. I think that would be a very fleeting existence, because even though you would be feeling good, you wouldn't actually be tying that feeling to any kind of outcome. That in a sense, it really wouldn't be real, because you're not doing anything. You're just experiencing the sensation, but it's devoid of consequence.
Yeah, it's interesting, back to what Dr. Stogango was talking about. And in his book, I think there was a chapter about some of these antidepressant medications, and how when you dive into it, just because you have a lower dopamine level or lower serotonin level in your brain than the other person, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a sadder person than them. Like, just because you can measure a reduction in one neurotransmitter doesn't mean anything in terms of your subjective experience. And I think that you brought up a good point with happiness and how to define that. I think it's a tricky thing to define, and people have different ideas of it. I think personally that happiness is an unrealistic goal, and that people can just hope for peace at best. And that's achieved by removing conflicts within your own brain and kind of rejecting a lot of these deities. Specifically, something like simulation theory can even become a deity to someone because they start treating it like a religion or something. And I don't know if there's any real practical applications of the simulation theory at this point. Like, some people say it can serve as a prediction model, but I don't see it. It doesn't really make sense to me. But what you're saying is, you're saying that there's a link between happiness and the results of the actions you're taking. Like, happiness is a formula made up of those two variables.
It may be even like a something deeper than happiness, that in a sense, and really I think in Nassim's book, he's kind of not so much refuting the simulation theory, but saying, I have to be careful. I haven't read this in a while, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. But the idea is that, what defines reality is the idea of consequence. That as a conscious person, you're alive right now, and if you die and you're dead, it doesn't really matter if you were in a game or, it doesn't, wherever you're existing, that's where you are. Like right now, you have the ability to cause things to happen through agency, through your personhood. But and that is in some sense immaterial if you're living inside of an alien game or not, or if this is base reality, to use the language of Elon Musk. That really, wherever you are is where you are causing consequence. That is what is real to you. And so, from my point of view, I'm in this world. I'm in this realm. I'm here with you doing this podcast. This is real to me because I'm
virtually.
Yeah, exactly, virtually over Zoom. But I promise everybody, Joe really is there. That this is real. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's all recording. This is real because of its consequences. That this will perpetuate beyond me, beyond you. And in a sense, it doesn't matter if it's on an alien substrate somewhere or if it's space reality or whatever, because for us, it's real. For humanity, it's real. Whatever else is besides that is kind of immaterial. It doesn't We don't know. It's like almost asking what's beyond the universe. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's beyond, it doesn't affect us. Like we need to be focused about this, about here and about now. And I think that model begins to recover a sense of reality that is robust to people's concerns over, is this, the simulation, is this the whatever? At some level, it doesn't really matter because this is where you live and this is where you have effect.
Mm-hmm. I think all the answers are there. They're all the answers to everything just exist right in front of you. It can all be intrinsically built upon from just what you see and observe and interact with. The challenge is just rejecting all these labels and realizing what's real and what's bullshit in the things around you.
Yeah.
Like what is right and wrong? Who gets to decide that? What is just? What is anything? And once you start looking at those and breaking those words down, it's a deep rabbit hole, but it's one that is rewarding nonetheless, I would say.
I agree. Let me get you on one more thing, and then we'll wrap up for this episode. And this is an idea that I know you and I have talked about before, but it's this idea that all progress is made at the starting point of the present. To build the future, we necessarily have to start with what we have now. And to kind of give an example of this, a cliche one, but a good one to kind of to make the point, the first computer necessarily was made without a computer. It had to be. Mm-hmm. It was the first one, and you build from that. And so, in a sense, I've been trying to. You and we had Miss Abysmal on 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3, whatever it was, talking about everybody should be meditating. So I'm thinking, all right, how can I get myself to do this? And so I thought, I'm going to combine two things. I'm going to combine the idea of meditation, and I'm going to combine the idea from people like Peter Thiel and Eric Weinstein about the future not being what we were promised, and there not being any progress. So how can I combine these things into one activity? And so I thought, I'm going to focus for an hour every day. I haven't done this yet. I'm going to start this weekend. I'm going to focus 1 hour every day trying to imagine something very specific about the future that would be better than it is now, and to try to figure out how I would reverse engineer that thing. And to tie this into the question I just had about building on from the present, is that in a sense, all progress, or not all of it, let me say some progress is this idea of reverse engineering the future, that we envision the future being different, but we are currently not in the future, we're in the present. And so we have to figure out how to create that future with what we have now. And I figure the only way that you can really do this is to just think about it. Imagine something about the future that you think would be better. And it could be anything. It could be a social issue, it could be a political issue, it could be a technological issue. But thinking about it, thinking about why it would be better, and then figuring out with the tools that we have available to us now, what we have to go through to bring it into existence.
Mm-hmm. I think that in order to manipulate the future in such a predictable way is an activity that's beyond the conscious mind. I don't think that you can get there through thought. I think that you can get there through subconscious processing, and dedicating an hour towards thinking about it, or at least having that habit or system on your schedule, could facilitate getting your subconscious to start processing that and thinking about how it happens. But again, the older and older I get, the more limitations I realize exist in the conscious mind, and in what's your thought train, like what's going on there. It's just a big bumble of random memories that keep popping in and out. And that any true genius or any true change, it's all coming from the subconscious. It's all coming from a piece of you that you largely don't have direct control over. Yeah. And you see that, like, people always have these aha moments. Like, it's not a result of just sitting somewhere and deliberating or thinking about something for long periods of time. It's like, it just happens. It's just like they're primed to be ready to come up with a solution. And then one day they're just sitting in the bathtub and it's like, boom, they get it. Or they're in the shower. Or like, you hear this over and over through like inventors. It's like, how'd you come up with that? Hey, Einstein, how'd you come up with this theory of relativity? It's like, I don't know. It just sort of came to me one day. Like, it's interesting. You see that trend over and over again. So
true.
I think that could work if you could build a habit of getting your subconscious on the track of thinking about that type of thing.
And I
definitely
always,
worked.
I always like the quote, I think, from Louis Pasteur, that the idea of having the ready mind, that, you don't control when inspiration strikes, but
Mhm.
you've prepared your mind enough so that when you come across a good idea, you recognize it. Like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, that's what I'm looking for. That's the idea. And I think that ties in really nicely with your idea of randomness, because we always have ideas bouncing around in our heads, and a lot of them are complete garbage. But unless we have a good
Yeah.
filter in place, we're not going to catch the right ones. We're not going to catch the good ones.
Yeah.
And so I think I agree with you, that I think a lot of this is subconscious, and I think at best what we can do is prepare ourselves to receive inspiration when it strikes, and to recognize the gold from the fool's gold. That's what we should be, in a sense, building our minds around. And going back to Jacob's taking it last week, is I think if we taught people how to think, we could improve that filter through everybody. I mean, again, I come back to just, I really think there's so much potential in essentially approaching education by making it way more challenging than it is now. Make it way more harder than it is now. It's a it's always like a cliche phenomenon in horse racing, that like the horses always do better when they're in competition, when they have a real challenge. They want to keep up with the other horses or something.
Right.
And
Right.
I think there's a level of that too, where if we're not afraid to challenge kids, that I think a lot of them would rise to the occasion and want to be a part of the team. I mean, again, I don't want to be a cliche, but I think it's going to take a lot of us working together to fix some of these big problems. And if we don't give all of us the tools, we're just taking people off of the team. That's all that we're doing. And I don't know about you, but I look out, I want as many people on the team as possible. That's what I want.
I don't care how many people are on the team, but that might just be my nihilism.
I want a lot of people on the team. I want as many people as we can, but if it is just you and I, it's still going to be a good show.
Yeah, at least we have our team mom.
At least we have our team mom. At least we have our team mom. Let me. I was going through my notes. I have a couple more things, but I want to save them till next time so we have a little more time. I'll just
Cool.
I'll give you a primer on these, and we can get to them next time.
A little teaser.
A little teaser, talking about agrarian primitivism. That was one, and then the second is
I don't know what that means.
Give you some time to look it up. Put it in the chat below. No.
Let me write it down.
Yeah, and then the second one is human vitality. What are things that we need to do to approach life with a sense of vigor, with a sense of purpose? My concern is that we are losing that, and that we need it. And authors that we both read, whether it be Nassim Taleb, Scott Adams, all the whole host, the whole rogues gallery of our book of our people that we read,
the whole motley crew.
The whole motley crew. They always talk about human vitalities. Scott Adams, of course, is famous for the idea of managing your energy, not your time. That's a great idea as well. But a lot of things that come from that. But I think, Joe, if you're ready, I think we go ahead and close this one out. This is a good episode, a good ending point.
Absolutely.
Anybody watching, follow us online, follow us on Twitter at Roses_Rhetoric, our YouTube channel, Roses in Rhetoric. It'll pop right up. We're also on Instagram, also Roses_Rhetoric. Follow Joe on Instagram, Jose _Cuervo. And check out our website, www.rosesinrhetoric.com. And we will be putting on our Instagram the write-up for this week's album of the week. But check that out. That was Saudade by Thievery Corporation, a really fun track. I enjoyed listening to it this week. And we're going to close it out. I'm Jimmy Hackett signing off for Joseph Stanford, saying ciao.